Welcome back, everyone, to the show. It's been a while since we've done this. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you like it. And dislike if you don't like it. And, grill us in the comments if you really hate us. And, our content at least.
Right. Right. Yeah. Keep it personal and superficial.
Only criticize us.
It hasn't been that long since we recorded because it was the last time it recorded.
No, okay. Yes, there was the last time that we recorded, but that was months ago.
It was in the century. It was in the century.
Okay. I guess it depends on what time period we're talking about.
Sometimes God's purposes unfold in a lengthy time. But we are unfolding in a very short amount of time. Now, some people would say, you're not unfolding, you're unraveling. Okay? That would...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
10-4.
What? Yeah. What does 10-4 mean, actually? I don't...
10-4 must have a meeting. But we know what the meeting is a sign-off for CB radio. But you're right. It's kind of like where, when there's a cliche and you think, I wonder where that means, like, well, that's just spilt milk under the bridge.
Who came up with that one? It was just like
Michael Scott from The Office. Don't cry over spilt milk or whatever.
Yeah.
But he got that's just water under the bridge and don't cry over spilt milk. He put those together. So if you study, let me know if I'm going to use the right terminology because I don't want to do a malapropism.
It's wrong.
Okay. The etymology.
Etymology. Oh.
Etymology of a word or a saying. The origin, I guess, is that what?
Etymology.
The origin?
Etymology covers all of that. It talks about structure of original words and also origins. So yeah.
Yeah. So if you study the original words or origins, sometimes you're surprised that you think that things that you always commonly say, like there was really a reason why it was said like that, and it started somewhere where, wow. That was deep. That was deep, everybody.
It had to start somewhere. It's funny because the other day we were talking about the etymology of a particular word. The term atonement. Atonement was invented by William Tyndale. He actually made up the word. He put at with one and then added ment at the end. And it literally means at one ment, like in the etymology. And it means basically that we're reconciled to God through Christ. That's basically what the word means. But I never knew that. But that's the etymology of atonement. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the going back to 10-4, there's probably a really logical reason why that it's 10-4. But to study the origins and stuff is it's important, it's interesting, and it can shed light on something. But
sometimes people are like, I know from experience, from my own life, where I want to know the real meaning of a word. So I look up the real meaning of the word, like etymologically, but the etymology doesn't always give you the current usage of the word. Sometimes we use them differently now.
Right. Well, and it's strange to think that, okay, let's not cry over spilt milk. That saying, did that happen when Sigmund started crying because he spilt the milk when he was milking by hand in 1500s, and his mom looked at him and said, "Sigmund, do not cry over spilt milk." And then, or did that scenario happen simultaneously or in a lot of different places all over the world? And because I tend to think it happened with Sigmund and his mom, or something like that. Could have been in a cave. But the fact that it started somewhere is kind of strange to think. Don't you think? I mean, just the,
No, because
no,
that's how things
that'd
work.
be obvious. That'd be obvious. But the fact that it became so
Widely used.
widely known
Yeah.
and used, and now
I would love to know the name of the guy that did that. Like, seriously. Like, grow a spine. Don't
Yeah.
cry over spilt milk.
yeah, I told a snake that once. Grow a spine.
That's
Quit being such a wimp
that's
and
that's what
crawling
a,
on the ground.
that's literally what a snake is. It's basically a living spine.
Yeah, grow a body. Anyway, so yeah, just to, but then I heard and it makes sense that you and I love philosophy, and
That's funny.
and
We love the love of wisdom.
yeah, love. But we also know that there is bad philosophy, and but anyway, I heard someone talking and they were saying that generally it takes about 100 to 200 years for major shifts or ideas in philosophy to sift down into the culture.
Yeah.
And so that's bad or good philosophy. And so a lot of the bad philosophy, you don't see the result of it until later. And he was talking about how Kant, who was semi-religious, I mean, had some religion.
Yeah.
But he got to the point that he couldn't. His philosophy basically stressed out the fact that he couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't, and so obviously that would lead to a destruction in theology, spirituality, life in general. If you couldn't know that what you saw or thought with your mind and the categories that you have in your mind for things, persons, places, or things aren't really real, and then how could? So anyway,
Well, you don't know if they're real. That's
yeah,
the
you
point.
don't know if they're real. Well, you don't know if they're the same realness or in the same way to the person next to you.
Yeah, well,
So
sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm good.
No, I was just gonna say that that's kind of what plagues modern philosophy in general. Like, you look at David Hume, and he's talking about, like, I think we talked about this before, but where he believes one thing on the one hand about philosophy, which is we can't really know things for sure, and then on the other hand, he lives his life as if he can know things for sure, and it's almost like this complete separation of the real life versus the philosophical life. And he was so depressed over his philosophy, but he just basically ignored it to live his life. It's like, to me, that doesn't make sense to me. It's like, I would think that the truth of philosophy, the true philosophy, would be able to be lived out and thought out, in my mind.
Well, and the truth sets you free, right?
Yeah.
So, and that you could logically and philosophically prove that the truth sets you free. You could, we hear this statement that the truth hurts. It's like, well, the truth only hurts when we want to do the opposite of the truth, and because then it convicts us, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I was thinking when you said Hume, that's just a funny name, but maybe that's where the term exhume come from. When they take a dead body out of the grave, they exhume the body. Maybe maybe that came from Hume, because it's like, okay, I don't want to be like Hume anymore. I want to come out of the grave. I want to be exhumed. Anyway.
Yeah, no,
that's where it came from?
I 100% doubt that.
Okay. Yeah.
150% doubt that.
So for him, he had evidence staring right at him. He had this philosophy that if he were to try to follow it or accept it, made him miserable. So he ignored it, and he became more joyful and happy. That would be the first test.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a definitive test, because sometimes bad things for a time make us happy, perhaps in a false way. But that's like, let me see. I put my hand on that burning oven, and it hurts. But if I don't put my hand on the burning oven, I'm fine. You know, that should.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of like the one Muslim philosopher talking about people that don't believe. Or he's talking about how to deal with relativists, and he basically is like, burn them with fire and see if they deny that the fire is real. That's what he said.
Right.
By the way, I'm not recommending that. I think that's a terrible thing. But I'm just saying that that's like, I don't know. That's what he said.
You and I talked about before how it seems like in the end times, there's a lot of wrath, sword, pestilence, and famine, and wrath thrown upon the earth, God's wrath, and then and that's almost like the last ditch effort to wake somebody up. It's not just simply a judgment, but a judgment has a purpose to try to rectify, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even though you said that you wouldn't recommend that, perhaps the last point might be, if someone says, I don't think I'm real or anything's real, and they're on the top of a 100-story building and they're going to jump off, you say, before you do that test, can I just take a match and put it under your finger? Because maybe you'll keep him from jumping off the building. So
I forgot who said this, but basically somebody said that pain is what compels us to look at things realistically, basically. Is to be, I think it might have been C.S. Lewis, and that I saw it, Joe Rigney probably talked about it. I don't remember. But basically, pain helps us to recognize the truth. And I think, like, when we acknowledge that evil exists, that evil affects the world, we can specify more about what evil is, but we don't have to right now. But when you recognize that evil, that there are effects that are evil, you recognize that there has to be some good as well. And good can only be initiated by a lawgiver and be given as a standard from God. And so evil, in the moral sense, helps us to recognize our inadequacy. But then on the other hand, pain helps us to recognize the fact that that God exists, or that we it helps to give us a wake-up call that things are real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of those first steps is to know that you're real. If not the first, that's probably the first step. And some people are upset. No, it's the Lord initiating. Well, the Lord initiated our creation, but for us as a creature, the first step is for us to be able to cognate, to think, and so if someone doesn't think they're real, then to talk about God to them that's probably not the first step. It's the first step is to establish that I'm actually talking to you.
Yeah.
But once you come to reality, then you find out the severe, I don't know what you saw, severe accountability, or severe, I don't want to use reality in the definition of reality, the severe consequences that reality presents itself. Because, so we are real.
Reality.
So we are real. And it seems that we're not immortal, because I observe that everyone dies. That would be a frightening thing. Okay, I'm real now, but there's going to be a time I'm not real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that would open up the door to philosophy. That would open up the door to hope. That would then open up the door to is there something beyond this? And since if I'm going to die and I can't stop it, then obviously I didn't create myself, because I didn't tell myself, "Hey, self,
Die.
I'm going to create you."
Yeah.
But I'm only going to have you live 80 years, and then boom, you're done and gone. Why would the self then answer the self and go like, "Okay, wait a minute, self.
Self.
I know we're in an insane asylum right now because we talk to each other a lot. But self, if you did create yourself, why not just make yourself immortal?" And then myself would answer, "Duh. Yeah, you're right." But anyway, there we have it. We've been exhumed.
I think this is I was thinking about talking about this quote anyway to kick us off.
Does it flow into it?
I think it does in some way.
Okay.
Even if it doesn't, I'll make it fit.
Make it fit.
No, but I think that the way that this applies is when we look at reality, we find inadequacy in ourselves. And I feel like if the nature of things was such that God didn't exist and we evolved over time, that the inadequacy would have a solution or an answer. Similar to C.S. Lewis talking about basically we long for something beyond this world, and we have answers to hunger and thirst, but we don't have an answer to this longing in our soul. That doesn't make sense. But here's something that John Henry Newman said in Parochial and Plain Sermons, Volume 5, Sermon 6. "We are not our own, any more than what we possess is our own. We did not make ourselves. We cannot be supreme over ourselves. We cannot be our own masters. We cannot be our own masters. We are God's property by creation, by redemption, by regeneration. He has a triple claim upon us. Is it not our happiness thus to view the matter? Is it any happiness or any comfort to consider that we are our own? It may be thought so by the young and prosperous. These may think it a great thing to have everything, as they suppose, their own way. To depend on no one, to have to think of nothing out of sight. To be without the irksomeness of continual acknowledgement, continual prayer, continual reference of what they do to the will of another. But as time goes on, they, as all men, will find that independence was not made for man, that it is an unnatural state, may do for a while, but will not carry us on safely to the end. No, we are creatures, and as being such, we have two duties, to be resigned and to be thankful." So, I think some of that it clearly applies to what we're talking about, because you're talking about we did not make ourselves, and we cannot be supreme over ourselves. And I feel that the atheist worldview, the materialist worldview, ends up making us our own, making us our center of the world. And we can't ever be satisfied with living for ourselves. And why should we expect that? Like, is it any happiness or any comfort to consider that we are our own? For me, it's not a comfort. But, and even for David Hume, that isn't a comfort. Or for Kant or anyone after them. That has never been a comfort to think we are our own.
And so Newman hits it on three levels: that we're created, we're regenerated, and what was the third?
Created, redeemed, and regenerated.
And regenerated, yeah. So in three different ways, God has purchased us, in a sense. The first creation is not a purchase, because he didn't go out and get something from somebody or somebody else and then make us with some Play-Doh, and he made the Play-Doh. he made the clay. But anyway, so then on one side, to me, when you read that, that screams two things to me. duty and accountability. So the fact that we are created, that we are redeemed, can be redeemed,
Yeah.
and regenerated, seems like there would be a duty to answer to that creation, a duty to respond
To the
Kinda
creator?
like- yes. And that's what did he say our two responses were? To resign.
Two
and-
duties: to be resigned and to be thankful.
Right. And so and both of those are what if we're not resigned? Then you would have to go, okay, what if we're not resigned and thankful? Then there's something we're not doing that would create a problem, perhaps, right?
Well, I would say we can't really have thankfulness unless we recognize God's mightiness and His excellence and Him being above all things. And so, in order for us to be thankful for the things that He gives us, we have to realize that we are needy. And that's what I think resignation is, right? Is to recognize the creator-creature distinction and to realize that we are needy.
Yeah, in one way, it would be becoming non-Pelagian, right? Because the Pelagian thinks he can work. Yeah. So then you see that, okay, this produces two other following questions, and basically two schools of thought. Okay, can we if it's all God that is the cause, then can we be held accountable for when we don't become just? Let's just say, we're not talking about how we're made just, but just at this point, but just if we don't do the right thing, how could we be held accountable? Because one person will say, well, you're a creature. And so, and God is the one that does all the work. So there would be two questions. Okay, what part do I play in it?
Well, is that the similar to the question in Anselm's On the Fall of the Devil?
Elaborate, because I did read that, but you were more in depth in studying it.
Oh, basically, I have it up here. 1 Corinthians 4:7. What do you have that you did not receive? And then the guy asks, does this apply to angels as well as humans? But the reason why this is similar is because that was about the free will of the devil. And we could apply it to humans as well. It's like, if it is true that what we have, what do we have that we did not receive? We receive all things from God. How is it that we don't... how is it that God isn't responsible for all of our actions, such as falling away?
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and so if you take the position that, it's all God, none of us, then you get an eternal. Let me think this through. I think you get a ongoing regress to come back to that question. Well, then why don't we? What I mean by that is so picture hydrogen and oxygen.
I'll try.
Yeah, if you can use a atomic microscope. If we can consider a hydrogen and oxygen, and you probably know this already. So if we take hydrogen and oxygen and put them in the same room, water's not going to come.
Right.
Unless a severe amount of energy is applied, and then we may get a few drips. But we know that hydrogen and oxygen, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen become water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say God, he wants water. So he gives us, we're the oxygen, let's say. So he has to, so he already he's the provider of us, the oxygen. But now he also has to provide the hydrogen to get water. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so one person will say, well, it just happens automatically. There's no cooperation on the part of the oxygen. Well, if we were just if we were simply just matter, only matter like without will and intellect, that would be true. But even in that situation, even in matter, something outside force has to affect the matter that is put together in order to produce the water.
Yeah.
And so then you go to the if God if we look at salvation in a sense as $20, and God gives us $20, and we need salvation in order to eat, in order to be alive, unless they define salvation as living and eating. He gives us $20 to eat. Well, what if we don't spend that money on food? And so God provided the money, but we misapplied the purpose. Am I getting off the mark?
No, I'm following. Okay. The problem, the question, the difficulty is in understanding why we reject why we don't spend it the right way. And it doesn't just go back to where we are now, it also goes back to the fall, because the question is also over the fall. How does the fall affect things, and how did the fall even happen? Right? And there's a mystery there. Because the answer that I would give for now, why don't we accept, or why don't we use the $20 the right way, is because of sin. And why do we have sin? Then we talk about Adam and Eve, and it's really difficult. As it is right now, certain people would say that we are entirely reliant on God in order to be saved, because we can't spend the $20 correctly.
I guess that's where I'm talking about the eternal regress of reasons, but and I think we already know that God is, or profess that God is the creator. So he created everything.
Yeah.
But what if he created such that, I mean, you and I have talked about this many times, how that free will would seem to be one of the greatest concepts or creations that
I'd say it's the greatest miracle.
Yeah. And frightful, but he's not. But if you do profess free will, it's not like God said, "Hey, I'm giving you free will. You're living in a dangerous world. Good luck." No, he doesn't leave us alone. Just like any father or good mother would not produce a child and then take it out in the field amongst all the wild animals and just say, "Hey, we gave you life. Good luck." And no, they're going to give work and effort to lead that child along until they're able to take care of themselves. And then if that child is able to take care of himself and they decide that, I don't have any problem with me rubbing my all over my body with bacon grease and go running in the woods where there's lions and tigers. I'm just going to do that. Well, you just made a really bad choice, because you're going to get eaten alive. And so is that the parents' fault?
To letting them go?
Is it the parents' fault that he decided to do that? No. They raised him correctly, right? Give him training, giving him, quote, grace. But coming back to the garden, sometimes when we consider free will, it occurred to me, what a tremendous insult, betrayal in God's face of what Adam and Eve did. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't do it. I'm just saying we've done that and maybe worse, perhaps.
Right.
Maybe they did the worst thing. Maybe they did the worst thing because they were in the in bliss, perhaps. But sometimes we miss how egregious that was because God didn't freak out like an uncontrolled parent and come running after him with a big stick, chasing him around the garden and beating him. He just came out, Adam, where are you? Oh, why are you hiding? You know, from that response from God, we think that, obviously God is at peace in himself because he doesn't need Adam or Eve.
Right.
He doesn't need creation. But we fail to see what a tremendous, grievous thing that was. That God gave and prepared everything for them so that they would live in happiness and joy for the rest of their lives. And they rejected it. And not only that, it, exalted themselves over God.
Well,
What a grievous thing.
Yeah, and their sin was the essence of all sin, I would say. Because what they decided to do is they ate of the tree that they thought would make them wise, and instead of trusting in God, instead they sought wisdom for themselves. That dependence on themselves. They wanted to be their own. And it's just not possible for us to be our own. Because what do we possess that we weren't given? And we did not make ourselves. We cannot be supreme over ourselves. We cannot be our own masters. We are God's creation we are God's property by creation, by redemption and regeneration. So even trying to seek another path outside of God's way, I would say that's the essence of all sin. And it's not, it doesn't actually make sense to be able to even do that.
Right. Well, and then I'm thinking that, okay, so free will, you and I tend to believe in free will, and obviously
I tend to believe that I freely believe in free will.
Yeah, I freely choose to believe in free will. And I'm thinking, when you described the garden, I'm thinking that God wasn't following along Adam going, okay, now eat that pear. Adam, eat the pear. Okay, now eat that orange. Okay, now bend down and take a rest. Adam, and same thing to Eve, Adam and Eve were walking through the garden. Did God say, okay, I created you. There's your woman. Walk around the garden for 5 minutes. Now sit down. No, they were exercising free will. But kind of like in that G.K. Chesterton comment about the fence, God gave him a fence. He said, okay, yeah, eat.
Right, a law.
Hey, but do not eat of the this tree, because this will cause you to die. And so someone will say, well, see, there's not free will. No, it's free will with some parameters. And so
and like restricting somebody in a certain way doesn't mean that you're encroaching on their free will or something. It's like they chose to break it. You could choose not to break it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could freely choose not to break it, right? Because that's still a free choice. Even if, some people would be like, well, you're compelled to do something. It's like, well, the idea that we're compelled to do anything is true. We're always compelled in some manner. What I mean by that is there's always things that draw our attention and draw our desires. And it's like, I desire something that tastes good. Does that mean that, do I have absolute control over the desire to eat something? Not exactly. There's something that compels me towards it, but that's just the nature of things. We always have something that compels us.
And and then also to think about, okay, so when God told him that if you eat of this tree, in that day you shall surely die. What? Okay, so they did. They basically died with as they deteriorate and their bodies start to decay, and they eventually die and expire.
Mhm.
That will be the end and separation. They will be ever separated from God. Unless God had a plan, right?
I had a
And,
thought.
go ahead.
Them being thrown out of the garden is almost like a death as well.
Yeah, yeah,
And that
yeah.
happened then.
Well, and then so first of all, they went from two extremes, and and it's probably the most severe. They went from life to death. Those have a chasm in between it that's not crossable. It's not like I had $100 and I lost $10.
No, you
No.
lost $100.
Yeah. But think about the severity of the penalty. And it is just because Adam and Eve are our parents. Everyone that has ever been born is going to die because of that action. Whoa. We're talking billions. It's not only going to kill you, Adam and Eve, it's going to kill your children.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to kill the human race. Every last one of them. No one will escape because of that decision. And
and some people might say that's not fair. Like, they didn't know that would happen.
Well, and so you could say, well, okay, that's not fair. There's multiple levels to kind of show where that you understand the sentiment. We just feel, oh, that's not fair. Why should I pay for so and so? Well, logically, you can go this way. Adam and Eve are our ancestors. Okay, if we are in a chain connected to God, and Adam and Eve are the first link where God is holding them and they are holding God. If that link is broken, just ipso facto, just logically, no one after Adam can reach God.
Right. Yep. Yep. That's exactly the right way to think about it. Is it logically follows when you have a break in the chain, all the rest of the chain below it is going to fall. It's also similar to a train. Like, you have the engine, and then you have all the cars. If you get rid of the engine, which is basically what Adam and Eve did, they threw the engine away, then none of the cars after them is going to
momentum's
move.
Eventually they're gonna slow down until they're nothing, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're right. So then someone will say, well, okay, so thinking about the fall again, and they say, well, that seems not fair. Well, your idea of fairness is one of those indications that you were made in the image of God, because God is just. And
exactly.
So something in you perceives that justice should be had, and that seems unjust, even though you're wrong in that. But you're starting to think the right way, correct? You're starting to think that there is a cause and effect. There is justice. There is what's called fairness or equity. But so then, if Adam and Eve didn't have a choice, and this was all pre-programmed by God's, decree, then it would seem like a pretty harsh penalty for something that you decided you were going to have them do anyway.
Yeah, and I guess maybe there's somebody that believes that. I don't see as many.
Well, ultimately, different schools of thought may logically lead to that premise, whether they like that or not, because as you go down farther from the premise, you go like, well, let me modify this a little bit because that doesn't seem to be correct. But that being said, the mystery always comes back to why would so if if something so tragic, or the results of Adam and Eve's sin was going to be so tragic, so life-changing, so historically changing, what would you say? Just would change the whole
Course of history.
For man.
On our side of knowledge.
But. Yeah, it would seem that God would make it clear and plain and easy to fulfill. And, rather than difficult. And so, and then as I think about that, I think about the temptation of Adam and Eve,
mm-hmm.
and the temptation of Christ in the desert. Okay, the new Adam being tested. The first Adam was tempted while sitting in a lawn chair, drinking daiquiris with little umbrellas in it, having a cool breeze, and having all kinds of food to eat anywhere he wanted. And they just kind of like, nah, we're not going to go with you, God. We're just thinking that it's just, we kind of, and then you could contrast that with Jesus fasting for 40 days, which I don't know, maybe you've heard more on this, but it's medically almost not possible. I mean, most people would die fasting food and water for 40 days. So obviously there's some miraculous sustaining going on there. But regardless, it says that Jesus was famished. Is that like an understatement? Famished and thirsty. That would probably be an understatement. Because he's taken to the point that would kill most people, which tells you that he was getting tested at probably the toughest point. Adam and Eve were provided an easy solution to all of history to have it be blissful, and they failed. And Jesus is being challenged at a point of ultimate desperation. And
well, that's the marked difference between Jesus's ministry and Adam's fall and his decisions, because Christ basically dealt with all of the results of Adam's sin, meaning suffering he had to face, and death, and ridicule from man. And so he dealt with way more difficult things than him. Like, he dealt with the world as it is now. Adam and Eve made decisions in their state where they're in perfect harmony with everything. Nothing's against them. There is no difficulty. There is no pain. There is no death. And then afterwards, Jesus comes and redoes everything Adam does, but fuller and in the face of tragedy and distress, and he never sinned once. And and yeah, just the entire upending of what Adam did, basically just doing everything opposite.
Yeah. And so, that's why you have to be in Christ in order to be saved. Just like you would have to be a son of Adam in order to be human. You have to be in Christ in order to be saved. So it's the work of Christ that makes it possible.
Yeah.
And so, but the mystery is always, the mystery always comes to like, well, then why did Adam and Eve choose that? So the mystery is what caused that. And some people will say there's no mystery. God told them to do it, or God intended them to do it. Others will say,
I don't know who, but it's fine.
Others will say that we'll leave it at a mystery and go like, on paper, they shouldn't have. They had all the food they needed.
Yeah.
They made a strange free will choice. And when I say strange, it wasn't strange for them to make choices. I'm having orange this morning. I'm having mango this afternoon. It's making choices wasn't the strange thing, but this choice was strange.
Mhm.
And so, and that part, I believe someday we will understand that.
I hope so, because that's like one of the weirdest mysteries. It's like, I don't know why they did that.
Mm-hmm.
I think to chalk it up to ignorance is a mistake. I don't think that's what's indicated by the text, and I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm saying some people just say that's like the point that's being made, is that they didn't know and they wanted to know the truth, and so then they ate of the apple or whatever the heck it was, and basically that makes God at fault, right? Because he didn't tell them enough of anything. But I don't think that's what the knowledge of good and evil means. I don't think it means greater knowledge than they already had. I think it actually might represent a defect in knowledge, actually, considering that evil is a defect. And so to know evil isn't to gain anything, it's actually to lose something.
Well, and then when you said lack of knowledge, now maybe someone, okay, so, or they were ignorant, okay? I think the scripture is pretty clear that you can't be accountable for what you're ignorant of. And we would have to qualify that a lot, but I would qualify it this way, and then you do your qualification. I would qualify it this way. We are not held accountable for what we are ignorant of, but we will be held accountable for, let me say a paradox, that we will be held accountable for things that we're ignorant of. So then I just said the two opposite, but I have to clarify and qualify the second one. It's if we're ignorant of things that we should not be. That we should not be ignorant of.
And that would be due to certain decisions that we made in the past, right? It's like the addict can say all they want, I didn't choose to be an addict, but they are the one that started the process of becoming an addict, right? And so you may at some point become ignorant of the sin that you're committing, but that's because you have a seared conscience that beforehand you made these certain decisions to be brought down into this sinking ship where you can't get back up, right? I think that's a great example of that.
Well, I was going to just say that's a bad example, but a good example. I was going to do a paradox. It's almost it's very similar to the example of Adam. So for someone to say Adam and Eve are ignorant, you'd have to say, did they not hear what God said? Right. Is that what you're saying?
Me?
No, not sorry. You. The people that say that Adam and Eve are ignorant or not aware, it's like, okay, so then what are we to believe that in the scripture in Genesis, when it says that God told them that their ears weren't working, the wind was blowing too hard and they didn't hear what God was saying, or the peacock was sounding off right when he tried to say something, and they're like, didn't hear you clearly, no, it indicates that they did know.
Right.
They were not ignorant, but it required. Go ahead.
Sorry, but it also depends on what we're talking about. They were ignorant of, because I would say they were ignorant about the full consequences of their sin, but they were fully aware of, oh, God made everything, God did this and that. And I would say they had enough knowledge to not to be held accountable for the decisions that they made.
Well, in all that knowledge is supportive of the command. What I mean is the command in some ways came first, and then recollection of, well, he didn't make all these things, like you said, and create all things. But the command was the knowledge. And so the real question was obedience. And so taking your example that I said is bad and perfect, is that so someone that gets taken by drugs, if they have good parents or they're in a situation where they have a lot of good input in their life, they've been told that this will destroy your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Someone could say, well, they've never tried it before. So, they didn't really understand that it would destroy them. It's the same sin of Adam and Eve, because I'm like, okay, I know mom and dad, you said don't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's our situation as human beings. We've all done that in some regard, and over again, of making mistakes, knowing that, okay, you said that, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The mystery of, because of the fall of Adam and Eve, pain is gain. Okay. That statement, pain is gain. Working is gain. Well, trial and error is gain. You burn yourself. Okay. That was a consequence of the decisions that Adam and Eve made. Okay. It didn't have to be that way. It could have been like this. Hey, that tree is poisonous. You don't have to pain and gain thing. You don't have to try all the trees and find out which one causes you pain and which one causes you gain. You can just trust me. And guess what? You can have gain and gain. Gain and gain, gain and gain. No pain. But that precedent was a consequence of the decisions made by our first parents. But it can still it can get to the point of gain and gain because of the redemption work of Christ, right? So, but anyway.
Yeah, and the thing about pain, we talked about this already, about it waking up our minds to see the reality of God, and the truth of reality. And that's why, even though there was the consequence of pain being introduced into our lives at the fall, by God's decree, it's not just a curse; it's also a blessing, right? It helps us to.
It's a remedy.
Exactly, yeah. And it's amazing to me how the people that I know, when they work hard, they realize things about reality that they didn't before. And work seems to really help people to understand cause and effect of the universe, and the fact that we aren't enough, and that we are not our own.
And so, but like you said, that you're amazed when we start to learn things a lot once we start to have to work that we, for some reason, we're unwilling to understand before, or and so it was a good result. The work ended up being a good result. It's kind of like the argument between the Arminian and the Calvinist, or between predestination and not predestination. It's like, okay, when we quote, James, that says we're not saved by faith alone, we are saved by works and not by faith alone. We forget to like read that and go like,
justified.
It doesn't say works alone. It doesn't say we are saved by works alone and not by faith alone. It says we are not saved by work. We are saved by works and not by faith alone. It indicates that works and faith are necessary. It doesn't exclude, that statement by James does not exclude grace or faith. And it's not works alone, obviously, but works are, like you were saying, you learn things that you didn't know when you had to start working. But that wasn't the only thing that helped you to know something or to come to some realizations. You needed the work and you needed the education, or you needed the leading by your parents or the teacher. But the work that your teacher or your parents or the knowledge wasn't going to be enough. You actually had to do it. And so anyway, it just occurs to me sometimes when I hear the discussions on that is like where my point of view is coming. It's like I would like to tell someone that when we're debating that scripture or that portion or that concept, it's like it's important for the Armenian side to point out what seems to be obvious, that, or at least to acknowledge that it doesn't say works alone. And obviously the Armenian position is that we're not saved by works alone, but all I'm saying is there's kind of an inference. It's either works or faith. It's either works or grace. Well, why isn't it both?
Well, it's difficult because of other passages of Paul talking about grace and not of works. And he doesn't seem to qualify works of the law, but maybe he does. Maybe that's what he means.
Well, he does. He does in some scriptures, but not in everyone.
Yeah. Well, what does that mean?
What I mean is, when I tell you, let me put it this way. Let's say you're 3 and you go like, Papa, what is water? Or I go, hey, you want to drink water? And you go, oh, what is water? And I go, oh, well, water is made up of 2 elements of hydrogen and oxygen, and it's necessary for our nourishment and blah, blah, blah. And you go, oh, and then you drink it. Okay. That's when you're 3. Then when you're 5, I go, hey, you want to drink water? Papa, what is water? Well, water is made up of 2 elements of hydrogen and oxygen, and 2 elements of hydrogen, 1 element of oxygen, blah, blah, blah. And I give it to you and you drink it. And it's like, so then you're 12. Hey, Z, do you want to drink water? Papa, what is water? I'm like, at some point, some of the suppositions that I've already laid the groundwork for, I'm not going to keep repeating in every conversation. So, for example, there are times that Paul will say that we are not saved by works of the law, but he doesn't say that every time. If you take in totality, if you had to repeat every presupposition for every sentence that you are going to lay out and every definition for every word that's included there, we would get nowhere in conversation.
And I agree that he doesn't have to include, hey, works of the law here.
Right.
The difficulty for me, though, which I don't know if everybody actually fully analyzes that, because I could accept what you're saying, but Paul also includes the 10 Commandments in works of the law. He actually says, these are works of the law. The problem, though, is every act in the 10 Commandments is an act of love for God or for neighbor. So the problem is he includes those deeds which are the showing of love. And if for the Catholics, what saves us is faith. Hold on.
You got faith working through love.
Yeah, basically. If love is included in the 10 Commandments, and Paul includes the 10 Commandments in works of the law, then it seems a little bit difficult to say, hey, we're saved by doing these things as well as faith. That seems like it seems difficult to me, at least. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, let me point out the obvious. So, if I take the position that Paul talked about works of the law, and he's kind of assumed that, my opponent, I don't like to say it's an opponent, maybe fellow traveler is better.
Interlocutor, is that a right term?
Yeah, that would be the right word. But what I'm saying is the person that has the other position could say the same thing. They could use that same concept and say, well, Paul's already assumed that that works have nothing to do with it. and so he doesn't have to repeat himself. What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to show fairness. You give the coach what the coach deserves. So if I use a statement or a concept to kind of show that why maybe Paul doesn't repeat himself about this, the other person from the other position could say the same thing. So then you have to go and look, okay, so what's more, then you have that discussion and debate. Now,
no, I think it's reasonable to say that Paul is talking about works of the law, but my point was to talk about the good works of love that I believe we should do, but that's where my question is really, is more about like, if those are included in works of the law, and he says we are saved apart from works of the law, what do you think, or how do you respond to that?
Well, I would respond to with Jesus' words. It says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And all who love me keep my commandments. And so, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I would say? Now, when he says, why do you, I see a father there, kind of. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? He's not right. Those people aren't written off, in a sense. He's saying, hey, if you're going to call me Lord, Lord, you need to do what I say. And so, and that requires a reminder through life about that. But at some point, if you don't do what I say, we'll cut you off from me. So that seems like a keeping of a commandment is required,
Mm-hmm.
But is the circumcision necessary for salvation? Obviously not.
Right, and I agree with that. I'm going to analyze the text more because it's difficult for me to understand why Paul says these are works of the law, talking about the 10 commandments. But you're saying that Jesus says that we should keep his commandments. But I have a difficulty there because if Paul identifies those with works of the law, and he says we are saved apart from works of the law, I don't understand that.
Well, and that would be, we can maybe plan on having some discussion. Go ahead.
I don't know what I think about that, but I guess there is really a difficulty because Paul also says that love is greater than faith. I mean, he talks about we can have all faith and all faith. Gifts.
How much faith is left after you take all faith? None.
Right. So, he talks about faith, hope, and love. And he says love is higher above those. So that's where difficulty is so like if Paul is saying on the one hand and talking about the 10 commandments and those being identified with the works of the law, the problem is that the entire list of the 10 commandments is basically all the ways in which we could love anything, God or man. And so, on the one hand, he identifies it with works of the law, but then on the other hand, he says that love is greater than faith. And even though is it Romans or I don't remember what text, but where he's talking about faith, we are saved by faith, or grace. I don't remember what it was, but either way, it's just confusing. So I guess there's some interpretation that has to be done there.
Well, when it says that faith, hope, and love remain, but the greatest of these is love. And when you think about that, Why is it the greatest? And because well, let me ask you. This is kind of a gotcha question because I already have like a area or a place
Leading
I'm going.
questions are fine. I'm fine with leading
Okay,
questions.
so why do you think love is greatest, or what would be a reason why you would give?
I would say that faith enables us to love, and so love is something that we're trying to aim for, but we can't quite get there yet. And so then we're enabled to do it. That doesn't answer your question, but I'm just prefacing that. And so I think that we're meant to live in love, and love allows us to honor God and to basically give him what we ought. And so I would say that which gives God what he ought is greater than that which doesn't quite do that. But
Okay.
and so I would say that yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, it made sense. But let me posit it this way, and then you'll go like, boom, that's what. Which one describes God better, faith, hope, or love?
Well, obviously love, because does he have faith in himself? I don't know about that, or faith in something else. So, and God is love is also a statement in Scripture. So,
yeah. So, in God, God doesn't have faith and he doesn't have hope because he has all things.
Right,
He's
exactly.
omnipotent. He doesn't need those two. But he is love. In fact, I mean, that's from him. God is love.
Mhm.
That's what he's, so, but for man, we need faith and we need hope. But love is the originator and of the other two from a man's perspective. Okay, so the love of God in our hearts causes us to hope that he will not forsake us. Love in our hearts from God will give us the faith to endure difficult situations when it seems like God forsook us or has forsaken us. Love will be the ground for those two to work. But in heaven, we will have no hope. We will have no faith.
Because those things will be fulfilled. Yes, and love will remain.
Love will remain. And so so when it says, some of that can be like works, grace, and faith. Well, works are going to be gone.
Yeah.
Faith is going to be gone. This is a similar a contrast that's maybe not completely fair or 1-to-1, but love will remain, or grace will remain. The presence and actions of God. God's actions. If you think of grace as an action of God, that's one way you can look at it. That will always remain, because it's forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway,
I honestly, in my mind, I think that the discussion over that passage is probably, in my mind, the strongest argument for Catholic view. Because if faith is what we were saved by, entirely, the idea that love is greater than that is a little odd. It's like, is the thing that saves us greater or less than something that doesn't?
Right, I had to take that call. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
I heard what you're say that again.
Oh, I was just saying, I think it's probably the best argument in my mind for the Catholic position, because if salvation is by faith alone, and I guess the question would be, is that which saves you greater than that which doesn't? Than a is a virtue that saves you greater than a virtue that doesn't save you? And it would say, probably. And so, if love is indeed greater than faith, then to claim that faith is what saves you would mean that faith would be greater, I would say. Possibly. It depends on how you would answer it. I want to analyze that more, but that's why I think it's probably the best argument in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think it's a standalone argument. There's other ways that, but even if it was, there's many standalone arguments in the scriptures that we take that we don't need confirmation. When Jesus says, I am the first and the last, well, he didn't say that before, so I'm just not going to buy that, anyway. But when you think of a marriage, if someone says, what makes that couple married? Well, the contract. Okay, you're right. That is part of it. Well, what else? Well, that they fulfill the contract, or they love one another. Okay, that's another way to tell they're married. And then another way to tell someone is married is when they fight. They're like, wow, those people fight. They must be married. So it's kind of the opposite. But I mean, there's a number of things that make that marriage true. And if I took any one of them alone, it's very possible that does not confirm it. So if somebody really, if we said that the marital act of sex is part of the marriage, therefore people that are having sex are married, that doesn't follow.
Not exactly. No, not really.
No. So because they haven't a commitment to one another, right? They haven't had the ceremony of exchangement of vows, and they don't have a contract. Their families haven't come together to celebrate. So it would seem to me that faith, works, and grace are similar to that. That if you have to have. Are we saved by grace? Absolutely. No one will argue that.
No,
Are we saved by faith? Absolutely. No one will argue about that. Are we saved by works? Some people will argue about that for some reason. I don't know why, but some of it is to avoid the Pelagian trap. And
I know the reason. Again, it's because of Paul's statements.
Oh,
and so for me, that's why it's difficult, is trying to parse through his understanding of works is somewhat difficult. And also, on the other hand, there's also the principle that because we are unable in our natural state, because of the fall, to do that which is good and proper to the degree that we should, and God is the one that has to bring us into fellowship with him and has to give us a way, provide a way for us to be pleasing to him again, that any human action will not be enough to do that. And so that kind of makes people uncomfortable with the idea that even after we're saved, that after we're saved, that we could also have good works as that which is necessary, because we can't do that in our natural state, and because of the fact that we have a sin nature, and sin nature isn't pleasing to God. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
But that's my understanding of what the difficulty is there.
Well, some of that, as I'm thinking, is that okay, you know where I stand in my theology on that, and it's not my theology. I'm agreeing with a pre-existent theology, but when I think of from the man's point of view, we may look at an individual and go like, we'll look at their works, we'll look at their confession of what they're saying, and and we'll look at, let's say, their sincerity as three things kind of representing faith, grace, and works, let's say. Okay. And we will judge those things. And we know that we could have somebody doing a lot of works, but they're not really very sincere, you know? And then we will know that they don't say too many good things. You know, let's look at it as a marriage again, because then we can, they're not saying very many good things about their spouse when their spouse isn't there or whatever. So, all the works seem to say that they're married, or that it's a fruitful marriage, or that it's a loving marriage, or that it's truly what would be defined as a marriage. You know, the pinnacle of. We would judge those things based on those. So there'd be a fear for people to say, well, I'm just not going to trust works very much because people can lie. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But who isn't fooled?
God.
So my thinking is that the person that comes to God and says, and, at judgment and goes, and God says, yeah, you're not going to make it. Sayonara. And the guy says, look at all these good things I did. God knows more in depth, right?
I think I see what you're saying.
He's going bye-bye. So the next guy comes up and God says, yeah, sayonara. He's like, what do you mean? I have such faith in my heart. I love you, or whatever. You did nothing for me or for my children. You did not visit me in the hospital. You did not visit me in the jail. You did not feed me. Goodbye. And so,
right. And I think I see what you're saying, because for you, it's not that, okay, in our natural state, yes, we can't work to be able to be saved, right? What you would say is, the problem is that we don't have faith in that scenario. And so we should have both, is basically what you're saying, I think.
Well,
and that people in their natural state can't have both.
And what James is saying also, he's not saying, it's not written there, but let's just plagiarize if we can. Not plagiarize, let's add to the scripture, which is really a very safe thing to do.
Very safe. Don't do it, by the way.
But let's do some considerations. When James says that I'll show you my faith by my works, and he uses the food analogy. I definitely want the person to give me, if I'm starving, I want the person to give me food. And rather than the person that says, I'm going to pray for you that food drops from heaven or whatever, I am going to really like that person that gives me food. So James is talking about one point, but he's not saying that the guy who's giving him the food can tell that person, you're a piece of crap, here's some food. You're such a low-life jerk. I don't even love you. Here's some bread. He's not saying that that's enough. He's just saying that part is necessary. Otherwise, it's useless. You should love the people that you are giving food to. You know? Mm-hmm. You should have sincerity of heart. And you should be burdened by their pain. You know?
Yeah.
But he's talking, he must be talking to a certain group that says that they're professing that they're Christians, but they're not having any fruits. And he's saying, dude, this is not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because what probably happens is that their superiors or maybe their fellow Christians are saying, you're not being very Christian-like. And it's like, I believe. And so maybe he's reacting. Obviously, James is addressing an issue that is prevalent.
That's typically what the epistles do. or the
right.
letters.
And so he's warning about a danger that you do not want to be the goats that show up at judgment and tell the Lord that they believed in him and loved him, but did not do anything.
Mhm.
And as you see, the sheep that did do things, they weren't trying to judge, because they even denied they had works. They said, when did we see you hungry? I'm not even aware that I ever fed a hungry person. Oh, you did? Well, when did we go to the prison for you? They're not even aware of it. They're not even aware of the good works that they did. You know, or maybe they're aware of it, but they don't think, they almost think that this is just doing what I should be doing. You know, so
Yeah.
it doesn't get me anything. But God turns it around and says, oh, yeah. And kind of like the talent thing that you and I have talked about, that what about the person that takes his talents and tries to make money and loses it all? Now, granted, he shouldn't have gone to Vegas, but he didn't simply just bury it.
Yeah.
But what about those people that if they had the bread to give, they would. If they had the water to give, they would. If they had a way to go visit that person in prison, they would. It hurts them not to be able to go do that. What about those people? I have a feeling they're okay. Don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah.
We've gone on quite a long, and I don't know if did we stay on topic or did we kind of skate to other areas, or does it all apply?
Well,
I think it kind of all applies.
Yeah, it mostly does. Yeah. And yeah, I think that it applied, because we talked a lot about sin and the garden and our dependence on God and all that. And
it came well, and then with Newman's quote about the two things that we do is resign ourselves, which a lot of people think I'm going to resign myself and do nothing. When I resign myself at work to the boss, it means that I'm going to end up working because he wants me to do such and such. So I'm resigned to doing what he requires. So resign doesn't necessarily mean just you're sitting back in an easy chair going
Right.
like, okay. And then what was the other reason why he said?
Well, he said we have two duties: to be resigned and to be thankful.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And to be thankful, being thankful is an action, really. It's like, in my mind, I think of at least the idea of sacrificing something or giving something or saying thanks or doing something like that, right? It's not just resign and give up. It's like resign and be thankful. We've been talking a lot about theory in a way. And I think that it's one thing, I think this is one of the themes of our podcast. It's one thing to say, this is what we should believe, and one thing to believe it and act on it, right? And so, a quote that I really love, that I think really shows what is necessary for us in order for us to understand, is from St. Anselm. He says, "For I do not seek to understand, that I may believe, but I believe in order to understand. For this also I believe, that unless I believed, I should not understand." And what I'm basically gathering from that is that we talk about things that are hard to understand, and we shouldn't just discuss these things in order to believe. We should believe so that we can understand these things. And so I urge people to always look back to Christ and his work, and to think about the fact that he came to reconcile us to God, and he enables us to believe and to understand the mysteries of heaven. And that isn't like the reason why we should focus on Christ. It not ultimately, so that we could understand things, but we should believe on him so that we can be reconciled to God and be brought into relationship, in a relationship pleasing to God, and that Christ suffered on the cross so that we could do that, because it wasn't the cost wasn't small for him coming here, right? And the crucifixion is the center point of our religion. It's the thing that joins God to us in covenant relationship again. And I feel like sometimes it's easy to look past that. And I'm not saying we are. I'm just saying sometimes it's easy to forget that Christ bore our suffering and our iniquity and shame.
Everyone out there listening, thank you. Everyone not listening, you're not going to hear this anyway, but you really make me mad. You need to start listening. And we appreciate your comments, positive, negative. Like, share, and subscribe. And Pinchy, it's always great talking with you. And I hope you have a great weekend, and more power to you.
It's not the right phrase.
No. Godspeed.
Have a good week.